Good evening, Coral Springs. I am your Vice Mayor, Nancy Metayer Bowen, but before I begin my remarks, I would like to acknowledge my parents who are in the audience this evening, Miss Lynn and Marley Metayer. I am the leader that I am today because they instilled some amazing core values to me and my brothers and sisters.
April 1st, 2026 was supposed to be one of the most significant days of Nancy Metayer Bowen's life. She had spent weeks preparing for it. The calls had been made, the support had been lined up, and the community that had watched her rise from environmental scientist to city commissioner to vice mayor was ready to rally behind the next chapter. She was going to announce her candidacy for the United States Congress. She was going to stand up in front of cameras and microphones, and the people who believed in her and say out loud what everyone around her had already known for months, that she was ready, that she was going to take everything she had built in Coral Springs, Florida, and carry it to Washington. Her friends were excited. Her colleagues were excited. The Florida Democratic Party, of which she was vice chair, was excited. The Haitian American community that had watched her become the first black woman and first Haitian American ever elected to the Coral Springs City Commission was ready to see her break one more barrier. But Nancy Metayer Bowen did not make it to that announcement. She did not make it to any meeting on April 1st. She did not answer her phone. She did not respond to the messages and calls that began piling up from the people who were waiting for her. And when officers conducted a welfare check at her home on West Sample Road that morning and entered through the door, what they found in that second-floor bedroom was not just one day, but an entire future that an entire community had been building alongside her. This is the story of Nancy Metayer Bowen, and it is also the story of what the people who loved her are only now beginning to process, which is that the danger was not outside the walls of that house. It was already inside. Welcome to Behind the Evidence. If you are new here, this channel is where we go past the headline and into the full picture, the psychology, the sequence of events, the evidence, and the human beings at the center of every case we cover. Subscribe now and hit the bell so you never miss a story. This one matters. Now let's go back to where it started. Nancy Metayer Bowen was not simply a politician. That word is too small for what she was, and the people who knew her will tell you that immediately. She was a scientist first, an environmental scientist with a career built around the kind of work that does not generate headlines but generates change. The sustained, technical, on-the-ground effort to understand how communities are affected by environmental conditions and what can be done about it. Before she ever sat on a city commission, she was in the field, leading environmental justice efforts across the state of Florida, working to protect communities that did not always have the resources or the visibility to protect themselves. She responded to major hurricanes, Irma, Michael, and Dorian, bringing her expertise to communities in crisis. She served on the Broward County Soil and Water Conservation District. She built a career on the premise that the environment is not an abstract policy issue, but a lived reality for real people, and that those people deserve an advocate who understands the science well enough to fight for them with precision. She was also, by every account from every person who ever spent time with her, exactly the kind of person that public life rarely produces. Someone who made you feel like you mattered. Someone who lit up a room not through performance but through genuine presence. City Manager Catherine Given said she was the light in every room she entered. A close colleague, Alfredo Alvara, who had known her for nearly a decade, said simply that people were lucky to have lived even briefly in Nancy's world. North Miami Mayor Alex DeSalmi said she brought energy and moral clarity to every room she entered. These are not the eulogies of people reaching for something to say. These are the words of people describing someone they actually knew. She was the first black woman and first Haitian American elected to the Coral Springs City Commission. In a city of roughly 130,000 people in Broward County, that distinction matters. It represents something that extends beyond the individual, a door opened, a ceiling broken, a signal sent to every young Haitian American girl in that community about what was possible. She understood that. She carried it. And she used the platform it gave her not to consolidate position, but to keep pushing, keep advocating, keep building toward the next thing that needed to be done. The next thing, by early 2026, was Congress. Florida's 20th congressional district seat had been the subject of growing speculation following ethics questions surrounding its current occupant, and Nancy Metayer Bowen's name had been consistently floated as a natural successor. The support that had gathered around her candidacy was real and substantial. Local leaders, elected officials, party leadership, community organizations, all of them pointing in the same direction. Toward Nancy, toward April 1st, toward what was supposed to be the announcement that set the next chapter in motion. Her husband, Stephen Bowen, was 40 years old. He had been with Nancy through the rise. The photos on her social media showed them together at events, at celebrations, at the moments that mark a life built in public service. His Instagram bio, as it appeared publicly in March 2026, the month his wife was killed, read 3 words alongside his name: God, husband, armed. His page featured photographs of him at shooting ranges. There was no ambiguity in the self-presentation. He was a man who identified himself by his faith, his marriage, and his access to firearms, in that order, publicly, deliberately, for anyone who looked. On the night of Tuesday, March 31st, 2026, something happened inside that house on West Sample Road. We know what it was because Stephen Bowen told someone. He did not tell law enforcement first. He told his uncle. He drove to his uncle's home the following day, sat down, and said the words. He said he had shot his wife 3 times the previous night. He said he had used a shotgun. And when his uncle asked him why, Stephen Bowen said 4 words that are now part of the official police affidavit in his murder case. He said he could not take it anymore. 4 words. For a woman who had spent her entire adult life giving everything she had to the people around her, to her community, to her city, to her state. 4 words from the man who shared her home, her name, her life. I could not take it anymore. Investigators later learned from Stephen Bowen's mother that her son had called her on the afternoon of Tuesday, March 31st, the day before Nancy's body was discovered, and told her he was having a panic attack and was going to speak with his wife about it. That phone call places a marker in the timeline, a moment of documented emotional escalation hours before Nancy was killed. What happened in the conversation between Stephen and Nancy that night? What was said? What broke? What crossed the line between a marriage under pressure and an act of irreversible violence is not fully detailed in the public record. What is detailed is the result. Nancy Metayer Bowen was shot 3 times in her own home while she slept. After the shots were fired, Stephen Bowen did not call for help. He did not call 911. He did not call a family member and say something has happened. According to the affidavit, he covered his wife's body, wrapping it in blankets and placing it inside garbage bags in the bed where she had been sleeping. And then he went downstairs, and he went asleep. That detail, that he slept in that house after what he had done, is one of the most psychologically significant elements of this entire case. It is the kind of behavior that investigators and forensic psychologists note when they are trying to understand not just what a person did, but what kind of internal experience preceded and followed it. The choice to stay in the house, to go downstairs, to sleep, rather than to flee or to seek help or to report what had happened, suggests a level of composure in the aftermath that has its own particular weight when placed alongside the words he later used to explain the act. I could not take it any more implies a loss of control. Sleeping in the house afterward implies something else entirely. The following morning, April 1st, 2026, Nancy Metayer Bowen did not appear at the City Commission meeting where she was expected. Her phone went unanswered. Her colleagues tried to reach her. Her family tried to reach her. The people who were preparing to celebrate her congressional announcement with her began to feel something shift from excitement to worry. A police official at one of her morning meetings asked officers to conduct a welfare check at the family home. That request changed everything. Officers arrived at the home and entered. They made their way to the second-floor bedroom. What they found there ended the welfare check and began a homicide investigation. The Coral Springs Police Department, under Chief Brad Mock, confirmed at a press conference that afternoon that the incident was being investigated as domestic violence. Nancy Metayer Bowen, vice mayor, environmental scientist, trailblazer, the woman who was supposed to be announcing her congressional run that morning, was dead. Her husband, D. Stephen Bowen, was taken into custody. The physical evidence documented in the affidavit tells its own story about the sequence of events in that bedroom. Officers found spent shotgun shells near Nancy's body. They found a pillow on the bed that had burn marks on it, with what appeared to be a string attached, consistent with having been used to muffle the sound of a firearm. The presence of that pillow, with those specific characteristics, is one of the details in this case that investigators have treated as particularly significant. A pillow used in that way is not a spontaneous act. It requires thought. It requires preparation. It is the kind of detail that speaks directly to the question of premeditation, of whether what happened that night was the product of a moment that spiraled out of control or something that was assembled in advance. That question, premeditated versus unplanned, is at the legal heart of this case. Stephen Bowen is charged with first-degree premeditated murder, not a lesser charge. Prosecutors in Broward County have made a determination, based on the available evidence, that what happened on the night of March 31st was not an impulsive act committed in a moment of overwhelming emotion. They have made that determination at least in part because of the physical evidence, the pillow and what it suggests about preparation, and because of the actions that followed the shooting, the wrapping of the body, the concealment, the sleeping in the house, and the attempt to dispose of the weapon. Each of those actions, taken together, creates a picture of someone who was not lost in the chaos of an unplanned act, but was methodically managing the aftermath of one. Stephen Bowen was also charged with tampering with or fabricating physical evidence. That charge connects directly to what happened with the weapon. According to investigators, after telling his uncle what he had done, Bowen attempted to have his uncle hold a bag that contained the firearm used in the shooting. Surveillance cameras and license plate reader data tracked his movements following the killing, including locating his pickup truck in Fort Lauderdale. The weapon, according to investigators, was taken to another location in an attempt to put distance between Stephen Bowen and the evidence of what he had done. The combination of those two charges, premeditated murder and evidence tampering, tells the prosecutorial story of this case in compressed form. A killing that prosecutors believe was planned, followed by a series of deliberate steps designed to complicate the investigation and protect the person responsible from accountability. Stephen Bowen made his first court appearance on April 2, 2026, one day after Nancy's body was found. A judge reviewed the probable cause affidavit and denied bond. Bowen was ordered held in the Broward County Jail without the possibility of release pending trial. He was declared indigent at that hearing, meaning he was unable to afford his own legal representation. The court appointed the Broward County Public Defender's Office to represent him. And then, 1 week later, the case hit an unexpected legal complication that speaks to just how deeply Nancy Metayer Bowen had embedded herself in the fabric of the community she served. On April 6, 2026, the Broward County Public Defender's Office filed court documents asking to be relieved of representing Stephen Bowen. The reason stated in those documents was a conflict of interest. Multiple members of the Public Defender's Office, the filing said, had personal and professional relationships with Nancy Metayer Bowen. The office concluded it was ethically unable to provide Bowen with effective representation when the victim was someone its own staff members had known and worked alongside. The documents noted that this conflict would violate Bowen's constitutional right to effective assistance of counsel, due process, and a fair trial. The legal complication that is created is a real one. In the American justice system, every defendant, regardless of the nature of the charges against them, has the right to legal representation. A conflict of interest within the appointed public defender's office does not eliminate that right. It simply means that another mechanism must be found to provide it. A conflict attorney, a private attorney appointed by the court, would need to be identified and assigned. As of the time of this video, that process was ongoing. There is one more layer to this case that deserves to be addressed, and it is a layer that sits underneath the public story of Nancy Metayer Bowen, the politician, and speaks to the private story of Nancy Metayer Bowen, and the person who was carrying more weight than most people around her fully understood. In December 2025, 4 months before her death, Nancy's younger brother Donovan died. He was 26 years old. He had been a student at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, in February 2018, the day a gunman entered the building and killed 17 people. Donovan Metayer survived that day, but survival is not always the same as emerging whole. He carried what that day had put inside him for years, struggling with his mental health in the aftermath of a trauma that no one, and certainly no 26-year-old, should have had to survive. In December 2025, he died by suicide. Nancy grieved her brother while continuing to serve her community, while continuing to prepare her congressional announcement, while continuing to show up as the light in every room she entered. Even as she was carrying grief that most people would use as a reason to step back entirely. People who spoke to her in the final weeks of her life described her as still excited, still forward-facing, still believing in the possibility of better. Florida Democratic Party Chair Nikki Fried said she had spoken with Nancy just days before her death. They had embraced at a party leadership summit 2 weeks before she was killed. She said she never imagined it would be one of their last moments together. That accumulated context, the grief over her brother, the family struggling through one of the hardest seasons they had ever faced, the mention from Stephen Bowen's mother that he had called that day, saying he was having a panic attack and wanted to speak with Nancy, does not explain what Stephen Bowen did. Nothing explains it, but it contributes to a fuller picture of a household that was under significant pressure in the months leading up to March 31st. And it raises questions about what that pressure looked like from the inside, whether there were signs that the people closest to the Bowens saw and did not know what to do with, and whether the systems available to people navigating that level of cumulative stress were adequate for what was building inside that house. There is also a financial detail that emerged in the days following Bowen's arrest, one that adds texture to the pressure that existed in that marriage. Court documents revealed that in November 2025, the Homeowners Association of the Bowens Coral Springs property filed a lawsuit against the couple for unpaid fees totaling approximately $3,710. The suit alleged the couple had defaulted on association fees and sought permission to foreclose on the home to collect the debt. The suit was voluntarily dismissed in January 2026, roughly 2 months before the shooting. Financial pressure alone does not explain or excuse anything. But financial strain, layered onto grief, layered onto whatever was happening privately inside a marriage that no one outside those walls had full visibility into, is exactly the kind of compound weight that forensic psychologists who study intimate partner violence identify as a consistent feature of the period leading up to lethal events. Stephen Bowen identified himself publicly as a man of faith. God was the first word in his bio, and yet what he allegedly did in that bedroom on March 31st, and what he allegedly did in the hours that followed, is a profound contradiction of every value that framework is supposed to represent. That contradiction between the public self-presentation and the private act is something that the people who loved Nancy Metayer Bowen are now living inside. They are trying to make sense of how someone who stood beside her at public events, who appeared in photographs with her, who shared her name, was also capable of this. They may never fully make sense of it. And that is one of the specific, enduring cruelties of intimate partner homicide. The person best positioned to explain it is the person charged with committing it. And the explanation they have offered so far is 4 words. Words that tell us almost nothing about the years that preceded that night, the private dynamics that built toward it, or what Nancy Metayer Bowen experienced in the moments when she understood what was happening. What we do know is who she was before that night. We know she was someone who showed up, who lit up rooms, who fought for communities that needed a fighter and communities that did not always know they did. We know she made history once and was preparing to make it again. We know that her brother's death left a hole in her family that she was still carrying. We know that 2 weeks before she was killed, she was in a room with people who loved her, being hugged, making plans, still believing in a better future. Her city held a candle-lit vigil at Coral Springs City Hall 3 days after her death. Attendees were asked to bring white candles and to wear orange or green, her colors. They came. Of course, they came. Because that is what Nancy Metayer Bowen built across her career, a community of people who showed up for each other because she had always shown up for them first. Governor Ron DeSantis ordered flags at half-staff to honor her. The Florida Democratic Party, her colleagues at the City Commission, elected officials across the state, community leaders from the Haitian American community that had watched her rise. All of them found words to describe what had been lost. And all of those words, gathered together, point to the same absence. A woman who could have gone to Congress. Who would have gone to Congress? Who was supposed to be standing at a podium on April 1st, telling the world she was ready. Stephen Bowen is in the Broward County Jail without bond. His case is moving through the Florida court system, with the question of legal representation still being resolved. He faces first-degree premeditated murder and evidence tampering charges. If convicted on the murder charge as filed, he faces life in prison. The Broward County State Attorney's Office has not indicated whether it will seek the death penalty. Nancy Metayer Bowen was not a cautionary tale. She was a person. She was a scientist who cared about the water people drank and the air they breathed. She was a politician who believed that elected office was a tool for equity and not a reward for ambition. She was a sister who had just buried her brother. She was a wife who trusted the person she shared her life with. And she was a woman who was, by every account from every person who knew her, exactly the kind of leader that this country produces too rarely and loses too easily. Her announcement never happened, but her legacy already exists. It exists in every door she opened, every barrier she broke, every young Haitian American girl in Coral Springs who grew up watching her and understood that public service was possible for them too. And it exists in this moment, in the act of saying her name clearly and completely, and refusing to let what happened to her be absorbed quietly into the archive of cases where women are killed by the people who are supposed to love them, and the world moves on before their story has been fully told. Her name was Nancy Metayer Bowen, and she deserved her mourning. If you or someone you know is experiencing pressure or warning signs inside a relationship that feels unsafe, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Free, confidential, available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, by call, text, and chat at the hotline.org. Subscribe to Behind the Evidence. Share this video for Nancy. We will be here for every development as this case moves forward. Behind the evidence, there is always more, and we are always going to find it.